said, take a look at what happened.
You are watching The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. We've got crucial updates lined up for you, but let's begin with the top stories from around the world. The attempted assassination of Donald Trump represents a glaring failure by the Secret Service, which left the former US president exposed to gunfire in a breach of security that is now likely to haunt a long-idolized agency that has been repeatedly tarnished by scandal in recent years. While authorities attempt to determine the motive as the suspect's devices are seized, world leaders reacted with shock to the wounding of Donald Trump in an assassination attempt. Presidents and prime ministers globally spoke out against political violence and expressed their support for those affected by the shooting on Saturday. A big focus. It will figure prominently in the catalogue of extraordinary near misses. A few inches difference, and Donald Trump would likely not have survived Saturday's assassination attempt by 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. Political leaders have sought to douse the flames over the weekend. In fact, Joe Biden, putting his campaign on pause, has said such violence has no place in America and phoned his opponent, whom he referred to as Donald, which is a shift from the palpable rancor between the men at their first debate in Atlanta. Trump used social media to call Americans to stand united and show their true character. But in his latest address, though, Joe Biden has called for the temperature of politics to be lowered after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, further adding that politics must never be a literal battlefield, God forbid, a killing field.
My fellow Americans, I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're our fellow Americans. We must stand together. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers.
In an already chaotic presidential election, the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania has enraged his supporters, paused the Democratic campaign, and heightened concerns over political violence leading up to the November elections. The extraordinary photo of Trump just moments after the shooting with blood on his face and fist in the air will not only alter the course of the upcoming presidential elections, but also possibly redefine his election campaign. Just earlier this year, Trump had vowed to the National Rifle Association that if he were to be elected, he would reverse gun restrictions put in place by the Biden administration. At present, Pennsylvania does not require a proof of ability to handle or purchase firearms, and the Pennsylvania court has also removed restrictions on young adults to openly carry guns during an emergency. The Republican Party has been reluctant to back gun control measures, but considering the attack on Donald Trump's life, experts have suggested the Trump campaign revise their stance on gun control and safety. The shooting could also garner sympathy for Trump, who is confirmed to attend the Republican National Convention as scheduled, despite the shooting incident and his injury. In a joint statement, Trump's campaign and the Republican National Committee said Trump is doing well and looking forward to speaking at the convention in Milwaukee. The assassination attempt is likely to strengthen Trump's presence and ratings at the convention as he accepts the Republican Party's presidential nominee just days after the attack on his life. Samia Afsar for NDTV.
Well, for now, the assassination attempt is overshadowing everything in the heated presidential race in the US. Mitch McCann joins us live from New York with the latest update from Ground Zero. Thanks so much, Mitch, for making time for us. Now, this attempted assassination of former President Trump, it has raised new concerns about security at this week's Republican National Convention, right?
It certainly has. Good evening again from the United States, where it has been a dramatic 24 hours after that attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania at about 6:15 local time last night. As you say, there have been significant concerns ahead of the Republican National Convention in the coming days. That's taking place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, somewhere where Donald Trump has landed in the last couple of hours on his plane. He is there. He will be speaking later this week. And the Secret Service has tried to reassure people that the situation is under control and they have taken care of the security measures and there'll be no issues later on this week. Of course, the security services and the Secret Service have been planning this for a very long time, so you can imagine they would have looked into this very carefully in the last 24 hours after this attempt on Donald Trump's life. And speaking of Donald Trump, there have been some new developments in the last short while. He's given a very short interview to the Washington Examiner newspaper, and I want to read you a quote from Donald Trump where he's talking about this Republican convention in Milwaukee. He says, "The speech I was going to give on Thursday was going to be a humdinger. Had this not happened, this would have been one of the most incredible speeches, aimed at mostly the policies of President Joe Biden. Honestly, it's going to be a whole different speech now." That is Donald Trump talking about his speech to the Republican National Convention later this week. I'll read you that last quote just again. Honestly, it's going to be a whole different speech now. That is from Donald Trump.
Right, interestingly, Mitch, also in the past 10 days, two political ratings analysts have downgraded Joe Biden's chances of winning Minnesota. And Minnesota has not voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 1972 and Richard Nixon, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think Minnesota is one of these states, but there are many more to consider as well at the moment. There are 6 or 7 swing states, and most of them, if not all of them, have been going in Donald Trump's favour for at least 6 months now. It's been a difficult few weeks, few weeks for Joe Biden. I think we have to acknowledge that. There have been loud calls for him to stand down as the Democratic nominee for president up until this happened yesterday. I think that conversation will be put on pause for some time now while they consider what has happened in Pennsylvania to Donald Trump. But yes, that's right. There are a number of states where at the moment, if the election were held today, the polls would show that the Democrats would lose. One burning question after this incident in Pennsylvania is going to be, how will this impact Donald Trump's campaign? There is some suggestion that it will see him gain a lot of support. People that maybe support Donald Trump will now vote for Donald Trump.
Yes.
But that remains to be seen. It's important to note there are still 4 months until the US election. And as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, things can change on a dime very, very quickly.
Mitch, as always, thank you so much for joining us with the latest from Ground Zero. Market experts, meanwhile, warn that as with any geopolitical event underpinned by mounting concern or outright fear, especially given the opening of the Republican convention, gold would have a strong bid, coupled with a pickup in demand for treasuries as well. But in an instant, the 2024 presidential election in the US, just about 110 days away, and the future of America itself has been transformed. A polarized nation now faces the threat of deepening political violence. The motivation of the gunman is not yet known, but the suspect, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks from Pennsylvania, was actually a registered Republican according to state voter records. He previously also made a $15 donation to a political action committee that raises money for left-leaning and Democratic politicians. But the shooting has sent shockwaves around the world, with leaders expressing deep concerns about violence in the American democratic process.
Take a look at what happened.
Minutes after former US President Donald Trump was shot, leaders from across the world expressed their shock and concern over the incident. Leaders of India, China and Europe condemned the attack as several expressed fear about the rise in political violence.
The idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it.
Former US President Barack Obama also condemned the incident, saying there is absolutely no place for political violence in our democracy. British politicians, including newly elected PM Keir Starmer, condemned the assassination and wished Trump well. Reform UK leader and MP Nigel Farage, who has attended several rallies in the United States in support of Trump, said he would have been attending the rally had he not been elected as Member of Parliament from Clacton. Farage has said he will, however, be attending the Republican convention on 15 July to show his support.
Well, I was very upset when I heard the news late last night. I mean, Donald Trump has survived by miracle, frankly, but one innocent man is dead. Two are fighting for their lives in hospital. So it's horrible, and yet somehow not surprising.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky called the assassination attempt as heinous crime. And among the serious challenges global democracies are facing right now.
Замах на життя Дональда Трампа – жахливий злочин, який можна тільки засуджувати і який демонструє, наскільки серйозні виклики глобально зараз перед демократією. Насильство в жодній формі і ніде абсолютно не повинно взяти гору. Я впевнений, Америка гідно пройде цей виклик. Я бажаю якнайшвидшого відновлення пану Трампу, сил, підтримки усім, хто постраждав. Хай кожен злий умисел зазнає невдач. І хай усі, хто може повертати безпеку, дійсно роблять це.
A statement released by a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson revealed that China is following the shooting incident. It said that President Xi Jinping has expressed sympathies to former President Donald Trump. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also strongly condemned the assassination attempt, asserting that violence has no place in politics and democracy. In a statement released on social media platform Truth Social, Donald Trump has urged Americans to stand united. The former president has also said he looks forward to speaking from Wisconsin, where the Republican National Convention will be held on 15 July. With Mohammad Ghazali, Bureau Report, NDTV.
Well, for further clarity, we have with us former CIA officer Glenn Carl. He was also the former Deputy National Intelligence Officer for transnational threats. This includes terrorism on the National Intelligence Council in the US. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us. The attempted assassination represents a glaring failure by the Secret Service, which left the former president exposed to gunfire and a breach of security. That will likely haunt a long-idealized agency that has been repeatedly tarnished by scandal in recent years, many would argue. Would you call this a security failure?
Well, it will be called that because the event occurred. Anytime something that is not supposed to happen occurs, then it's characterized and taken to be a failure. So the answer to that is yes. Sometimes, and many times actually, whoever is responsible for a given issue will do nothing wrong, and yet something wrong will happen anyway. But the person is responsible, or the people, or the organization. It is inevitable. We all know the practice in navies that if a ship hits a shoal or something happens wrong, even if the captain had done everything possible, the captain is held responsible. So that will happen no matter what the investigation ultimately finds. There are, as we have talked about already, a couple of reports, eyewitness reports of alarming, what appears to be an alarming oversight.
But Mr. Carl, as investigators dig into multiple accounts, it will be vital to also look at radio traffic from local and state police, as well as the Secret Service. How much time elapsed from the first reports until word reached the agents? Was there a communication breakdown? It is said that Secret Service has a shortage of manpower. Would this issue now be highlighted in the event of such an attack?
Well, I suppose an institution will say almost reflexively that they need more resources. It needs more resources or more personnel. That one can always find more work to fill more hands. But I don't know that the Secret Service needs more resources that way. That's possible. I do not know. I do know that the Secret Service works hand in glove with local authorities in all different levels of government, with the CIA, with the FBI, with local police, wherever they are. There's the Butler police force, which I'm sure is quite small because Butler, Pennsylvania is a small town, but nonetheless, they would be quite important for an event and involved in an event in their own town, and they would work with the Secret Service and vice versa, and on all the levels of government. So that is not an indication at all that there is a problem, rather that there is a coordination among the multiple overlapping relevant instances of the government, federal
Right.
and local.
Mr. Karl, the timelines of the Secret Service's response and its coordination with local law enforcement has been thrown into question by witnesses who said that they alerted authorities about what was happening. Do you think in terms of public image management, the Secret Service made the right moves?
First reaction, perhaps as a former insider, is that it wasn't a mistake. The FBI is the law enforcement agency with the lead responsibility for investigations on the territory of the United States. And so that struck me as a routine procedural step. Now, whether that would satisfy a public who wants to hear from the firsthand individuals responsible, that's a reasonable question to ask. I am certain that the Secret Service hierarchy responsible for this will speak at various points. My initial reaction is not to be alarmed, but in something so fraught as an attempted assassination of a former president and presidential candidate.
Is it possible to completely secure open rally events like this, though? What would be the changes that you want to see at such big campaign events?
I think perfect security is impossible in any circumstance, but in particular, given that, as the previous person being interviewed mentioned, and as we all tragically know, there are literally more guns in America than there are citizens. So that gives America a particular dark honor for those who wish to commit mayhem or violence. But President Kennedy, the day he was assassinated, said to one of his advisors, well, if someone wants to kill me, they will succeed at some. There's nothing ultimately that could stop this or make me untouchable, and that is tragically correct.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining us with the latest. Important questions about the shooting remain unresolved. But the fact that the 20-year-old gunman managed to scale a roof about 200 yards from where Trump was speaking has already prompted calls for a searching investigation of the Secret Service. In fact, gun control is back in the spotlight. And for further clarity on local rules and the future of gun laws in the US, we have with us Shikha Hamilton. Thank you so much for making time for us on the World 24/7. How do you think the assassination attempt on former President Trump will impact conversations around gun control and safety in the US? Trump had previously vowed to scrap any gun control restrictions implemented by Biden's administration.
300 Americans are shot every single day. And so now Donald Trump joins that club of gun violence survivors. And it's sad to say that whenever there's a high-profile shooting, that's when this country pays attention, the world pays attention. 43 years ago, our namesake, James Brady, who was press secretary to Ronald Reagan, was shot. And since that time, he fought for gun safety laws, and he died of those injuries eventually. But at that time, even Republicans supported the Brady bill, and we were able to pass one of the most significant pieces of legislation at that time. So the country came together and passed that significant legislation, and I'm hoping I can only hope that Republicans and Democrats will come together again to pass meaningful legislation to save lives.
But do you think Trump may change his stance on gun control after this attack, or will it be business as usual for the GOP?
One can only hope. Being a gun violence survivor is traumatic to watch shooting after shooting. I know because I talk with them every day. And so I would hope that Donald Trump realizes the trauma of being a survivor and takes action. But of course, I can't speak for him or predict what the Republicans will do. But this is a time when the country needs to come together as they did 43 years ago in passing the Brady Law.
Shikaba, how widespread is the gun violence epidemic in the US, and what are the core reasons behind it? How can communities and local governments be more involved in preventing gun violence beyond just legislative measures?
So gun violence takes 40,000 lives every year, and that's not counting the people that survive shooting. So that's 300 people who are shot every single day, 100 who die. And so this is a significant problem in our country, and the problem has long been an electorate one that does not represent the people, as well as an over-financed gun lobby that successfully markets guns as the solution to gun violence, creating a culture where America has more guns than people, and we pay the price with our lives. We have more gun dealers than McDonald's and Starbucks combined. We have a gun in this country for every man, woman, child, and dog. So it's a problem, but when we can't take action federally with our Congress, we've taken action in the states. I live in the state of California, and for the past 30 years ago, we had a significant high rate of gun violence. And in that period of time, we passed significant legislation that has reduced our gun death by 49%. If the rest of the country would follow, we would be saving lives and we wouldn't be looking at these large numbers today. So it's not just about these mass shootings. It's not just about these high-profile shootings. There's day-to-day gun violence that Americans are facing every single day. And as an Indian American, my parents surely didn't come to this country thinking that this would be a number one problem for our children. In this country, it is the leading cause of death. And I am the mother of a daughter who's a half African American and half Indian. I worry about it every single time she walks out that door.
How do you then respond to the argument that stricter gun control laws infringe on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding US citizens?
California is an example of that. We have the strongest gun laws in the country, and people have no problem legally purchasing firearms. In fact, gun sales go up every time there's a Democratic president in office for the fear that guns are going to be taken away from them, and there hasn't been a problem. So it's a myth.
Also, Shikha, what do you believe are the most effective measures that could be implemented to reduce gun violence in the US? And how can policies address both gun control as well as mental health care?
So right now, when the Brady bill was passed back in 1993, they didn't anticipate internet sales. And so now that law needs to have a 2.0 version that prohibits gun purchases without a background check. Right now, there are still states that can allow gun purchases without a background check because of the loophole in the law. So number one, the Brady law currently has prohibited 4.2 prohibited purchasers from obtaining a gun. We can make that bigger. And For example, there's about 20% of gun purchases that go without a background check. That's a problem, and that's contributing to the gun violence. And as far as the mental health issue, we've also been passing laws in states called the Extreme Risk Protection Order, which lets family members, when they see someone in their family in a crisis, they can get a temporary restraining order that prohibits that person from obtaining a weapon during that time that they're going through the crisis. It's
Right.
a temporary restraining order, so it's not permanent, but it solves the problem for that immediate need. And then if further action needs to be taken, the court can decide.
But do you think the government is likely to step up after this incident?
That is my hope, that Congress will take action, but it's up to this Congress that fully does not represent the American people. 90% of Americans believe that you should have a background check before you buy a gun. And I don't think there's anything in any country that 90% of people agree on. That's one of them. And then the other problem is the assault weapons. When we had the assault weapons ban between 1994 and 2004, mass shootings were down. They have gone up over 300% ever since the ban was lifted. Nobody needs an AR-15 to hunt. It is strictly for the use of killing people, or that's how it is the weapon of choice of mass shooters, and we
Right.
need to bring an end to the use of those.
Well, Shikha Hamilton, really appreciate you taking time out for us and joining us on the World 24/7.